Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the Maelstrom Hunter and got Harem? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Signal Academy, 8:56 AM Monday, Naruto's POV. How the heck did I get back to this place? I thought I was done going to school after I graduated from Konoha Academy. But here I am, all uniformed up, books in hand, and a small frown on my face. The uniform consisted of a white short-sleeved button-up shirt with the top two buttons unbuttoned, black pants with pockets in the sides, and black Venetian shoes. Again, how did I get into this mess? Flashback begin. Near Signal Academy, 11:35 AM clone number 10's POV. A sigh escaped my lips. I just had to be one of the smarter clones. Not one of the many clones with such a short lifespan that they would only complete their tasks and then cease to exist. Oh well, can't dwell on that. I decided to complete my task as slow as possible, just so I could have a longer life than most clones. Taking the time to reflect on the purpose of my existence and how it didn't fill the empty void feeling I had. I was in deep thought for a few hours, taking in the sights and sounds and scents. Soon enough, around noon, I stumbled across a cluster of tannish buildings that were connected by one of those gray stone paths, only these paths looked more new and didn't have cracks in them. These paths were sieged by areas covered in green grass, a few small trees lined near the path here and there. In front of me, to my right, was a large stone the same color of the buildings with an inscription. It said, "Welcome to Signal Academy, training the hunters and huntresses of tomorrow." Hunters? Huntresses? I was not familiar with the term, so my curiosity was piqued. "Hey, you." I heard from behind me. I turned my head to see a large burly man with pale skin and brown hair approaching me. His demeanor consisted of a blue button-up shirt along with navy blue pants. He had a shining metal item attached above his chest and a black item, which I had guessed was a radio, attached to his left shoulder. If I had to guess, he was probably a guard of some kind. "Me?" I asked, not knowing where this was headed. "Yes, you. What the heck are you doing out of class?" the man exclaimed. I started, confused by his statement. "Never mind, you're coming with me to the principal's office," he cut me off, grabbing me by the arm and pulling me in what was most likely the direction of the principal's office. So, from what I have figured out, this is a school campus, and this man, who is most likely a security guard, is pulling me to the school's principal's office to most likely receive punishment. Kami, why couldn't I be one of the less troublesome clones? Soon enough, we arrived at the school's principal's office. The man who had dragged me here opened the door. Inside the room was quite simple. The walls were a light shade of gray, there was a filing cabinet in both corners of the room, and in the center, a desk made of oak wood rested, the surface covered by stacks of paper, though none the size of what the Hokage had to deal with, a few pens, and a nameplate in the front center of the desk. "Mr. Brown," the security guard started, addressing the man who stood behind the desk. I caught this young hoodlum trying to skip class. "Well, Mr. Brown," a middle-aged, slightly balding man with glasses, said, "we won't have any of that. What's the student's name?" Well, the security guard started. "I didn't exactly get the name of the student. What's your name?" Even in these circumstances, I gave the man a deadpan look. "Naruto Uzumaki," I said, seeing as their surname goes after their born name. "Ah, well Mr. Uzumaki, I haven't heard of you being at this school before." I panicked a bit, hoping that they wouldn't find out I wasn't really part of this school. Suddenly, I got an idea. "I'm new here," I said, sweating slightly. A small silence graced the room as I awaited my fate. "Well, that explains why," Mr. Brown said. "But that still doesn't explain why you were skipping your classes," the security guard said. "I kinda lost my schedule," I lied. "Oh," the security guard said, embarrassed a bit. "Now Harold," the newly named Harold, the security guard straightened up a bit, "go back to what you were doing, and this time, before you bring people to my office, make sure you get their identity first." Harold nodded his head and left the room. Mr. Brown had a smile on his face before Harold left the room. After he left, his smile turned into a slight frown. "Now Mr. Uzumaki," he started, his voice turning more serious, "I don't like it when people lie to me right in front of my face. So tell me exactly who you are." I stared at the man in surprise. He had been able to see right through my lie. "How did you know I was lying?" I asked. "Mr. Uzumaki, I've dealt with a lot of students over the years. I learned to tell when students lie or not. Well, my name really is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm sort of a runaway," I said. "I left my homeland because of certain circumstances that I'm not willing to say." So you've run away from home? Where exactly is your home?" he asked. "Do you have a map?" I asked. He nodded his head and brought out a map the size of half the desk. The map itself was simple enough, it had a light brown color, highlighting the land masses in black. 4 castle-like icons stood out on the map, most likely indicating areas of civilization. I dragged my finger across the map until it hit the landmass near the bottom center area. Mr. Brown looked surprised at that. "Here," I said. Mr. Brown looked between me and the area of the map I had pointed to. "There?" he asked, unsure about my answer. "Yes, I came from a land known by the name of the Elemental Nations," I answered. "And you're sure of this?" "Yes, I lived in an area known as the Elemental Nations." After that, we talked about the Elemental Nations. He asked me about my homeland and I asked him about this place. I told briefly about chakra and how it worked and that I was hiding from people who wanted to use me as a weapon. Soon enough, he helped me create a false identity and enrolled me into his school, Signal Academy. I got my class schedule and thanked him for his help. And that was the end of my lifespan. I closed my eyes, accepting my fate, and then everything was black. Followed by a blinding white. Flashback end. Signal Academy, 8:59 AM. Naruto's POV. Students passed by me, wrapped up in their own conversations. I was caught up in my own thoughts when I heard a giggling noise come from behind me. I turned my head to see a group of girls giggling and blushing at me. Oh Kami no, not the fangirls. I saw what Sasuke had to go through with them, I almost felt pity for him. Now, I'm just sympathetic towards him, which is a first. Cuckoo, I felt a shiver go down my spine as one of the girls laughed creepy, joined by the other girls. Fearing for my life, I used a secret technique. Run from the fangirls no jutsu, a technique I had seen Sasuke team, Kakashi, and Karasu Anbu use many times before. Quickly escaping the sight of the fangirls, I weaved in and out of crowds until I got to a corner and faster than lightning hid behind it. Using my awesome shinobi powers I sensed around the corner, I comically poked my head around the corner and looked left and right. Seeing as I wasn't being followed, I sighed in relief. I escaped the horrors known as fangirls. For now I hear the QB say. That wasn't very reassuring, but then again, it's the QB's job to screw with me psychologically. Ignoring the QB, I took a look at my new surroundings. Great, just great. Lost before the first day has even begun. You look lost, you need any help? I hear a feminine voice from behind me. I turn my head to see a girl around my age behind me. She was wearing the girl's school uniform, which consisted of a dark red plaid skirt, a white short-sleeved button-up shirt, and black flat shoes. She had black hair with red streaks and 2 silver eyes that had a slight gleam in them. "Yeah, I'm new to the school, and I might have gotten lost," I said, stretching out the last part. "I can show you to your classes," she said. "By the way, I'm Ruby, nice to meet you." "Name's Naruto, the #1 hyperactive knucklehead ninja," I said, puffing out my chest in pride. "But I thought ninjas were supposed to be stealthy, you didn't look so stealthy back there," my chest, along with a bit of my pride, deflated at that. "You saw that?" I asked. She just giggled a bit. She said, a small smirk plastered on her face. "So, can you help me find my class?" I asked, changing the subject off of my shenanigans. "Sure, where you headed to?" I looked down at the paper that held my schedule. It said my first class was with someone by the name of Crow. What kind of a name was that? "It says I have my first class with some guy by the name of Crow," I said, hopefully pronouncing his name right. "Oh. You got my uncle for your first class," she exclaims cheerfully. "Sweet. Dadabeo," I exclaimed. "Dadabeo?" she curiously asked. "Sorry, it's a verbal tic," I said, looking away slightly out of embarrassment. "We have to get to classes before we're late," she exclaims, looking at the time. After receiving directions from Ruby to Crow's class, I ran to the place so that I wouldn't be late. Whilst running to class, I ran into someone, both of us went down. "Sorry about that," I said. I looked at who I ran into and found the person who I had collided with. I didn't get a good look at who I ran into, but I could tell that the person I ran into was female. She had a slightly more tanned skin compared to mine and spiky mint green hair. "Crap. Sorry about running into you, but I got to get to class," I exclaimed, running towards class as I waved goodbye before she could answer. Finally, after running to the classroom, I found Professor Crow's room. Opening the door, I entered to see that my tardiness had gone unnoticed, thankfully. Other students talked with their friends, all excited for the first day. The room itself was larger than expected. The seats were leveled so that an arc was formed around the center, and each level was slightly more elevated than the last. In the center of the room, in front of a green chalkboard was a tall man. He had black hair with patches of gray hair visibly present, dark gray eyes that held years of experience and knowledge, and he wore black pants and a gray suit. "Alright class," he started, "take your seats. I'm Professor Crow, welcome to Weapons 101. -7 hours later. Classes were over once that final bell rang. I left the classroom with a speed that would put the Hirishin, Flying Thunder God, to shame. Groups of people moved together, chatting with one another about classes and their lives. I was walking down the path, minding my own business when I heard someone call out my name. "Hey Naruto." I heard from my left. I turned my head to the source of the voice to see Ruby and another girl standing with her. The other girl had long, wavy blonde hair that accented her royal purple eyes. Along with the school uniform which was mandatory, she had on black fingerless gloves and yellow metallic bracelets. "Hey Ruby." I called back. I moved over to where the duo was standing and started up a conversation. "So how was your first day at Signal?" Ruby asked. "Pretty good," I said, "a bit hectic though." "So who's tall, blonde, and foxy here sis?" the blonde girl standing next to Ruby asked. "Oh yeah. Naruto, this is my sister, Yang, this is Naruto," Ruby replied. "Nice to meet you," I said, smiling a bit. "Likewise," Yang replied, also smiling. The three of us talked for a bit after introductions were out of the way, but eventually, we all said our goodbyes and parted ways. Soon after they left though, I noticed another familiar face. The girl I had run into earlier was talking with two other guys. The one to her left stood around 6 feet tall or so, had dark brown spiked hair and light brown eyes and strangely enough, a white horse tail. The other guy to their right was at least a foot shorter than that horse guy, he had red shaggy hair along with a small beard, his eyes were charcoal black, and like the taller guy, he too had a tail, except his resembled that of a monkey's tail. Before I could say anything to them though, they had already left. I shrugged my shoulders, I would probably run into them later on. Heading off of the school campus, I ventured the city in search of easy pickpockets and shops. Naruto's base, 8:23 p.m. Naruto's POV. The day was exciting I thought to myself. It was really surprising at how easy it is to pickpocket people in this city and get away with it. And after borrowing some money and some other stuff, I bought some dinner and materials for making myself a weapon, using the shops that Professor Crow recommended for our first project, creating our own weapon. "No, it wasn't," the QB said, "there's nothing fun around here." "You just had to, didn't you?" I mentally deadpanned. "Had to what?" the QB asked. Cutting the mental connection I had with the QB, I entered the warehouse I was staying in. As I entered, I heard the sound of talking come from inside. Preparing myself, I pulled out a hidden kunai I had hidden in my pants. Crouching down, I peeked around the corner to see who was in my base of operations. Luckily, I had hidden the scroll of seals in one of the storage units. There were at least 10 people in front of me. They all wore black suits with red shades and black fedoras. 7 of them had red katanas in their hand, whilst the other 3 had hand cannons, or pistols as they're called, in their hands. Forming 10 Kage Bunshins, the clones snuck behind the armed people. Nodding my head, I signaled the clones to strike as they each knocked out their targets. After all the targets were knocked out, I mentally ordered the clones to tie them up near the nearest police station. After the last of the clones exited with the unconscious men, I took it upon myself to investigate why they were here in the first place. In the center of the room there were several large dark gray crates. Curiosity got the better of me as I moved closer to one of the crates and opened it up. Standing back and covering my face in case it was an explosive, I braced myself. After a few seconds, and not exploding, I peeked past my defenses to see what was in the crate. It wasn't explosives, nor was it drugs. Instead, the crate was loaded with these odd glowing crystals of varying colors. I think they're called dust crystals, if what Mr. Brown told me is correct. And if they're as useful as he says, then I just struck the motherlode. It was then and there that I calmly reacted to this bountiful collection of dust that I had acquired by jumping around in joy and frothing slightly from the mouth. It certainly was a good day to be me. Ahem, I heard from behind me. I turned my head to see a man in a red-collared white suit, a gray scarf, black gloves with rounded sleeves, and a black bowler hat with a red band. What was noticeable was his bright orange hair and dark green eyes, and a cane-shaped object in his hand. "Do you mind?" I stated, slightly pissed off, "you're ruining a perfect moment here." "Yes, I do believe that those crystals are mine, though," the man stated, in an overly polite tone with a hint of anger. "And?" I stated, not caring about what he said. The man looked at me slightly pissed. "And they should be returned to their rightful owner, me." I narrowed my eyes. Where have I seen this guy before? Wait a minute. "Hey, I recognize you, you're that criminal guy on TV that wears the eyeliner," I exclaimed, pointing accusingly at him. The man's left eye twitched slightly, but he still kept his composure. Yes, I am." "Now give me the dust, blonde," he said. "Why should I?" I asked dryly. Well, his mouth opened to give an explanation, but no words came out of his mouth. After a minute, he finally shrugged his shoulders and slumped in defeat. "I got nothing," he finally said, "just give me the damn dust." Then he pointed his cane at me, revealing a hollowed-out hole at the bottom of it, most likely to shoot something. "Hey," said Blonde, "I have the advantage over this battle," he said with a smirk. I formed an all-so-familiar cross-hate hand sign. "Oh really?" I said, giving a smirk of my own and formed a dozen Kage bunshin. "I beg to differ." His expression went to that of a mixture of confusion, surprise and panic, seeing as he was outnumbered and caught by surprise. He lowered his cane cannon and put his hands up in mock defeat. "Okay, that I didn't expect. Take me away, Mr. Fuzz," he said mockingly, extending his hands out like he was being cuffed. "You have 10 seconds to leave," I said. "I'd take that offer, if I were you." He casually strode out of the room, as if I wasn't very threatening. Before he left, he turned to me. "I won't forget this," he said, a scowl on his face. "Next time, you'll regret messing with me." "Whatever you say, Flaky," that got another eye twitch out of him. And with that, he left. Making sure that he was gone, I went to the cargo box I hid the scroll of seals in to see if it was still there. Thankfully, it was still there. Grabbing it, I unraveled it and activated the Uzumaki blood scroll. And in a puff of smoke, Harem appeared. After taking in the new surroundings, he turned to speak to me. "Looks like you found yourself a neat little hideout," he said. As my left eye twitched, he started smirking. "I like to call it my hidden base of operations," I stated, sticking my tongue out in a childlike manner at the end. His smirk got bigger at that, before his expression turned serious. Getting into a fighting stance, he spoke to me. "Now, let's start working on your training, shall we?" he said. After speaking, he charged at me, not even giving me time to get into a fighting stance. "Unknown location, third-person POV. And you're sure of this?" a male voice said. "I'm positive," a female voice replied. "Didn't you feel it as well?" "I can't say I didn't," a third voice replied, also male, "but if he's here, do you think?" "Most likely," the first voice replied, "but I think we'll be hidden for 2-3 years at the most before we encounter others." The three mysterious figures stayed silent after that, digesting the new information. They had expected this for a while now, but had secretly hoped that they wouldn't be found out. "Does he know?" the first voice asked, finally breaking the silence that permeated the air. "I don't think it's likely," the second voice answered, "but he'll eventually find out." "And when he does, then what?" the third voice asked. "Then that's when we'll confront him," the second voice replied. Silence once again filled the air as the trio stood silent, waiting for someone to break the silence. And eventually, the third voice spoke up. "I still think we should confront him now," the third voice stated, uneasy with the current plan. "It'll be better if he figures it out on his own, that way should he be caught, our secret will be safe," the second voice said. "Fine," the third voice finally conceded. The trio stared at one another, as if already knowing what the other was going to say. 500 Ryo on it, taking him 1 year, the first voice said. "You're on, I'll place 500 on too," the third voice challenged. "Humph, idiots," the second voice, the only female present, said before smirking, 500 on 3. "You're gonna make me rich," the first voice said, a smirk could be made out in the shadows. "As if you'll be weeping when I clean you out," the third voice countered. "Boys please, you'll both be weeping when I win," the female said, having the largest smirk of the trio. 3 years later, third POV. "Legends," a female voice started, "stories scattered through time. Mankind has grown quite fond of recounting the exploits of heroes and villains, forgetting so easily that we are remnants, byproducts, of a forgotten past. The gems in the image glow green and fade to show simple pictures of a man rising from the earth before being surrounded by creatures, barely held back by warriors. Man, born from dust, was strong, wise, and resourceful, but he was born into an unforgiving world. An inevitable darkness, creatures of destruction, the creatures of Grimm set their sights on man and all of his creations. These forces clashed, and it seemed the darkness was intent on returning man's brief existence to the void. Black sets in, then suddenly lessens as a light grows brighter and brighter, until a gem rises from it and lowers itself into the hands of man. However, even the smallest spark of hope is enough to ignite change, and in time, man's passion, resourcefulness, and ingenuity led them to the tools that would help even the odds. This power was appropriately named dust. The scene zooms out to show men shooting lightning, raising swords, and aiming rifles at the retreating beasts as a castle appears behind them. Nature's wrath in hand, man lit their way through the darkness, and in the shadows' absence came strength, civilization, and most importantly, life. The castle zooms out to show the world map, which houses other buildings until they disappear in flashes of white, and the map is lowered to show the scattering moon over a city at night. But even the most brilliant lights eventually flicker and die, and when they are gone, darkness will return. Roman Torchwick and 14 of his henchmen head down an alley from the shadows. They stop behind Roman, who reignited his cigar without touching it and grins before walking down the road, frightening nearby citizens as they make their way towards the shop from dusk till dawn. "So you may prepare your guardians, build your monuments to a so-called free world, but take heed, there will be no victory in strength. Roman and his henchmen enter the store, approaching the shopkeeper. But perhaps victory is in the simpler things that you've long forgotten, a different, more masculine voice says. The image turns black, revealing nothing but a pair of two fireballs, one blue and one red. The two fireballs combine in a counterclockwise direction, forming a pair of dark purple eyes with 4 concentric rings fanning out from the pupil across the sclera of both eyes. Things that require a smaller, more honest soul, a third voice finished. The two eyes suddenly collided with each other, forming one eye. As soon as the two eyes became one, the eye changed from dark purple with 4 rings to crimson red, still retaining its 4 rings, only difference being that all of the rings except the furthest from the pupil had 3 tomo, making a total of 9 tomo in the eye. Near From Dusk Till Dawn, Naruto's POV. Here I was, walking to a store called From Dusk Till Dawn, reading the book I had gotten from Deterum no Sato, The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi, which was an interesting read considering Jiraiya's books were mainly smut. Thinking about the perverted hermit made me think on what's happened in the last 3 years. Wow, time really flies. These last 3 years went by so fast and with so much progress. I mean seriously, it felt as if some guy was typing words into a computer, got lazy, and decided to skip over some sort of canon timeline, whatever the heck that means. Meh, it's partially true. Shaking the thought aside, I decided for some random reason to stroll down memory lane. Well, let's see here, QB attack on Konoha, check. Crappy 12 years, check. Betrayed by my supposed best friend, check. Struck a deal with the devil, check. Got a new look, check. Became a student, check. Built an awesome weapon, definite check. Learned new awesome jutsus, double check. I changed over the years, no longer standing at 5'11", now standing at 6'1", my once spiky golden blonde hair has grown out more and now with jaw-length bangs, just like my father had. All in all, I looked more like my father would if he had whisker marks and fox ears and tail. I was wearing something similar to what Anbu and Satsu Senjutsu Takushu Butai, Special Assassination and Tactical Squad, wore, minus the mask. I wore a sleeveless turtleneck black shirt, black fingerless gloves with metal plates that had the Uzumaki symbol etched in them, black pants with bandages wrapped around the right thigh, black ninja sandals, a grey flak jacket with the Uzumaki symbol and a dark orange on the back, and to top it all off, I had a pair of goggles similar to my old ones on top of my head. Except the cloth was a dark red. My body had no baby fat left, all of it being molded into muscle from Harem Juji's training. Along with my increase in physical strength, my training in Fuinjutsu, Ninjutsu, Taijutsu and Kenjutsu had exponentially increased. My Gain Jutsu was still crap, but it had gotten better. I've discovered that I can use Gain Jutsu, but I can't cast it without Fuinjutsu seals because of my massive chakra reserves. I also learned of my chakra affinity. The first time I sent chakra through one of those chakra papers, I got some interesting results. The paper split in half with one sharp clean cut, one of the halves turned into pure water and the other half spontaneously combusted. From what Harem Juji told me, my chakra affinities were Fuitin, wind release, Suitin, water release, and Kaiten, fire release. The Fuitin from my father, the Suitin from my mother, and the Kaiten from, strangely enough, the QB. After learning of my affinities, I learned a multitude of awesome jutsus from the scrolls I had on me, Kami bless Kage Bunshins, shadow clones. And with the help of Harem Juji and Crow-sensei, along with the dust crystals that I had acquired, I was able to make 2 weapons, both very unique. Strapped to my back was a near-perfect version of an all-so-familiar blade that I had seen only once before. From the mission to Wave Country, I had made a near replica of KyuubiSage's decapitating carving knife. But unlike the original, it has a few more add-ons. Spending over 6 months forging this blade alone, but it was worth it. After all, combining chakra metal, dust crystals and titanium I had acquired isn't exactly an easy task. The blade itself was at least 7 feet in length, handle and blade together, and had an orange line running through the sword and the edges of the circle at the top. The blade didn't have the regenerative ability of the original, but Harem Juji had engraved regenerative seals that only required chakra to use, added with the fact that it could control the elements of dust, it certainly was a magnificent sword. Strapped to the left of my waist was a short blade that was made of a fusion of chakra metal and titanium. And finally, I had 2 gun holsters, each on one side of my waist, and each held an onyx black .45 Fletcher with an orange line running along both sides of the guns. It was made from a chakra metal and titanium mix that made it so instead of using regular bullets, I could shoot out shots of condensed chakra, saving lead bullets in magazines. And ever since my changes, Yang had begun flirting with me much like Anko Neeson would, and Ruby had this constant blush on her face much like Hinata used to, maybe she had a fever. Speaking of people from Konoha, every now and then I get letters from Iro-senin via Gamakichi or Gamatatsu, the last one I got stating that they finally added Tsunade Bachin's face to the side of the Hokage mountain. Of course, I send letters back. Though I try to keep my location hidden, I have told him that I'm safely beyond the Oki no Okinet, ocean of mystery. I was shaken from my musings when I heard the sound of glass breaking. Looking up from my book in a Kakashi-like manner, I saw a red blur crash through the window of From Dusk Till Dawn, tackling a man dressed in a black suit with red-tinted shades. Getting a better look at the red blur I saw, the person turned out to be female. She stood at 5'10", with a pale complexion, silver eyes, and black hair with red streaks. She was wearing a black outfit and skirt along with a red hood. And in her hands, was an all-so-familiar red sniper scythe crescent rose. "KyuubiSage," I yelled out to her. She turned to look at me and blushed a bit. Did she have a fever again? "Hi Naruto," she yelled back. We were about to go into one of our usual conversations until we heard someone clear their throat to get our attention. Standing in the area where Ruby crashed through the shop window was Roman Torchwick, surrounded by several of his lackeys. A cigar was in his mouth and his cane cannon was in his right hand. "Blakey," I exclaimed cheerfully, successfully making his left eye twitch, "how you doing?" "Okay," he started, "get them, especially blonde." Half of his lackeys charged at me, while the other half attacked Ruby. Seeing as there were only 7 charging at me, I brought out 2 of my items. In my right hand was the gun from my right holster, and in my left hand, I held the tale of the utterly gutsy shinobi, open to the page one had left off on. Thinking that they had the upper hand, 2 of the lackeys charged at me. Not even looking up from my book, I shot out 2 bullets of condensed chakra, both hitting their desired targets. Seeing as there were still 5 left, I quickly disposed of them with 5 more bullets, instantly killing them. I looked up to see how Ruby was faring and saw that she had taken out her enemies as well. Off to the side, climbing up a nearby ladder, Roman was escaping. Grinning, I took off after him, Ruby not that far behind me. We climbed up the ladder, following the path that Roman took in his escape. On top of the roof of the building, I knew that he had some kind of escape plan. He wouldn't have made it this far in his villainous career if he got caught easily. As I prepared myself for what could happen, I heard a rumbling sound come from where Roman was. "Persistent," he says, as a getaway bullhead rises up and opens its hatch to allow Roman inside. "End of the line, red, blondie," he exclaims smugly, throwing a red dust crystal at Ruby, aiming his cane cannon in our direction. Just as the blast from the cane cannon was about to impact, a blonde woman jumps in the way holding a wand of sorts. Waving it once in the air, a giant purple crystal seal of sorts appeared, blocking the shot from Roman's cane. After the smoke from the impact dissipated, I saw that the woman was wearing a female business suit and a purple cape, rectangular glasses, and had emerald green eyes. Waving her wand-like object once again, this time, causing the purple crystals to form into several streaks that shot out at the bullhead, causing the pilot to struggle with controlling the aircraft. She then shot out a purple ball of energy which caused storm clouds to form and rain down light blue crystals on the ship. Standing in the area that Roman once stood on the ship was a woman in red with black hair and orange eyes. The mysterious woman formed a fireball in her hand and shot it at the blonde woman, causing her to form a purple protective barrier around herself. The mysterious woman then formed a fire pillar underneath the woman she was attacking, causing the female blonde to jump away before it struck. The blonde woman then formed a crystal arrow and shot it at the bullhead. The mystery woman kept firing fireballs at the crystal projectile, but it kept reforming. The bullhead shifted down leftward, causing the arrow to bounce off the side of the aircraft, forming 3 streaks to attack the ship again. The mystery woman shot out a fire pulse of some kind, destroying the crystals. Ruby shifted her crescent rose from a scythe into its sniper mode and shot at the mystery woman. Wanting to do my part, I grabbed the 2 guns I had on my personnel and shot at the woman as well. All of the shots were deflected by the woman's fire powers. Eventually, she formed 5 fire pillars underneath our feet. I felt my body being pulled by some unknown force, narrowly evading the fire attacks. We watched as the ship flew away. I growled, knowing that Roman got away this time. "Dear Huntress," I hear Ruby say to the blonde woman, "can I have your autograph?" The dark room of shame, Naruto's POV. "I hope you realize that your actions tonight will not be taken lightly, you two. You both put yourself and others in great danger," the blonde woman, now known to be Glinda, said. "Well, to be fair, they started it," I said. "If it were up to me, you'd be sent home." With a pat on the back she started, I noticed Ruby started to smile, and a slap on the wrist. That last part she emphasized by swinging her wand at Ruby, who let out a small yak. "But," she started, "there's someone here who would like to meet you, both of you." As soon as she finishes saying that, she moves out of the way to reveal a man with gray hair, shaded spectacles, a dark green scarf with a small purple cross-hate emblem on it, an unzipped black suit, and brown eyes. In his hands he held a mug and a plate of cookies with a ramen bowl. "Ruby Rose," the man starts, leaning in a bit as he continued talking, "you have silver eyes." Ruby started, trying to come up with words. "And you," he said, directed at me, "Naruto Uzumaki, I didn't believe what your file said, but apparently it's true that you have whisker marks." "And?" I asked. "So, where did you learn to do this?" he asked, gesturing to a screen that recorded our fight with Roman. "Signal Academy," Ruby replies. "They taught you to use one of the most dangerous weapons ever designed," he stated more than asked. "I'm more self-taught," I said. "Well, one teacher in particular," Ruby says. "I see," the man said, placing down the plate with cookies and the bowl of ramen. Whilst Ruby tentatively picks up one of the cookies and starts to eat them, faster than lightning, the bowl of ramen was in my hands and I was slurping away at the food of the gods. It's just that I've only seen one other scythe wielder of that skill before. A dusty old crow, the man states, after recovering from the surprise of the speed that I ate ramen. Mon call. Ruby says with a mouthful of cookies, she shallows and wipes her mouth. Embarrassingly, she continues, "Sorry, that's my Uncle Crow. He's a teacher at Signal. I was complete garbage before he took me under his wing. And now I'm all like Hoa. Which That last part she finished by making karate-style poses and noises. "And what about you?" he asked me. "Lots and lots of trial and error, a few times that one of my things blew up on me, eventually I got it down," I said, acting nonchalant. "To the point that you can shoot without having to look at your targets?" he asked. "Yep," I said, popping out the P in the word. "And what are you doing at a school designed to train warriors?" "I'm going to be a hunter," I said. "Well, I want to be a huntress," Ruby replied. "You want to slay monsters?" the man asked. "Yeah. I only have 2 more years of training left at Signal. And then I'm going to apply to Beacon," she exclaimed excitedly, talking faster and faster. "You see, my sister's starting there this year and she's trying to become a huntress and I'm trying to become a huntress cause I want to help people. My parents always taught us to help others, so I thought, hey, I might as well make a career out of it. I mean, the police are alright, but huntsmen and huntresses are just so much more romantic and exciting and cool and really, gosh, you know." That was followed by a small pause, the man and Glinda beepizing us. After a few seconds, the man spoke again. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "You're Professor Osborn, you're the headmaster at Beacon," Ruby said. The now identified Osborn smiled. "Hello," he said. "Nice to meet you," Ruby says. "Yo," I replied lazily, waving in a Kakashi-like manner. "You two want to come to my school?" he asked. "More than anything," Ruby said. "Sure, sounds exciting," I replied. After exchanging glances with Glinda, who showed a disapproving look, followed by a humph, Osborn turned back to us. "Well, okay," he said. I looked wide-eyed whilst Ruby looked like she had just hit the jackpot. "Aboard the airship to Beacon, Naruto's POV. Erg," I said. "Kami, I would never get used to these flying vehicles. It was one thing to fly with chakra, it was another to trust someone else with flying you around in a big thing of metal." Wahahahaha, I heard the QB laugh at my misery. "Oh, shut up, furball," I mentally said. "At least you aren't the only one who's suffering," it pointed out. I saw a blonde, shaggy-haired man who looked like he wasn't an experienced warrior throw up on Yang's shoes. "Gross, gross, 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 gross," I heard Yang exclaim. Get away. Get away from me. Get away from me. Get away from me. Get away from me," Ruby exclaimed shortly after Yang's statement. I looked out the ship's window, smiling to myself. "Look out, Beacon, the #1 hyperactive knucklehead ninja is coming your way," I mentally exclaimed before my motion sickness kicked in again. "Erg," I said, comically falling over with steam coming from my mouth. "Konoha Council Room, 3rd POV. Now that we're all here, let us begin the meeting," one Danzo Shimura said. "I'd like to know what this meeting is about," Inoichi Yamanaka stated. "I would like to know that as well," said Shikaku Nara. "It's about the QB brat," Danzo replied. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, the insufferable civilian side of the council went into one of their self-induced fits of rage. After a minute of their justifiable complaints, the Hokage shut them up. "Shut up," Tsunade exclaimed, thoroughly pissed off. "As I was saying," Danzo continued, "I think it's time for Konoha to get its Jinchuriki back. Beacon Academy entrance, 10 o'clock AM Naruto's POV. Soon enough the ship docked at the entrance. The blonde guy that threw up on Yang's shoes was the first off of the ship, followed by nearly everyone else. From the view of the floor, even with the puffs of smoke coming from my mouth, I could see Yang and Ruby standing over me. "Erg," I groaned out. The two sisters giggled and Yang brought out a camera seemingly from nowhere. Taking a photo of my misery, the two eventually helped me out of the flying metal death trap after a minute of laughing. We were walking away from the ship and towards Beacon. I crossed my hands and pouted in a childlike manner, seeing as Ruby and Yang were still laughing. "It's not that funny," I said. This only served to increase their laughter. Yes it is, Yang replied, and now I have dirt on you. I saw her smirk and countered it with my own, seeing as she wasn't the only one with blackmail. But you forget that I still have pictures from that, I said, her expression instantly turning from amusement to horror. You said that you got rid of all those photos, she said, slightly quivering in fear. I still have a few here and there, I countered, my smirk growing wider as I spoke. You wouldn't, she tried to reason. Try me, I said. The world seemed to go silent as we got into one of our daily stare downs to see which of us would back down first. So far the score was Naruto 561, Yang 356. Soon enough, Yang backed down, and I tallied 562 to my score. Wow, I hear Ruby say as we got closer to Beacon Academy. The view from Vale's got nothing on this, Yang said. I'll say, I added. I see Ruby start to eye weapons like a kid in a candy shop and soon as launched after them, her sister Yang, not so far behind her to make sure she doesn't go crazy. I sighed, even here, Ruby is still a weapon enthusiast. I looked around, looking for other familiar faces, when I see a familiar trio that I encountered in Signal, only this time, they weren't wearing school uniforms. To the left was the red-haired kid with a monkey tail, only he was wearing something similar to what I saw Shinobi from Iwagakure wear. A one-strap flak jacket, a shirt with one long sleeve with the other short, and baggy pants, attached to his sides were two revolvers with extended blades, French Frank's revolvers. To the right was the really tall guy who had a horsetail, not much had changed besides him wearing a face mask, he wore red samurai armor, along with a red straw hat, strapped to his back was a large double-edged axe shotgun. And in the middle was the girl with mint hair, it appeared she also had orange eyes. She was wearing a white shirt that showed off her belly button, along with a white skirt, she had some weird-looking tonfas at her side. The trio seemed to notice me as the girl in the middle waved at me, I waved back and was about to head over to them when suddenly I heard something from behind me. Kaboom! I turned around just in time to see an explosion of flames, snowflakes, and electricity. Also in time to have the front of my face turn into one of those blackened cartoonish faces. I blinked once, twice, 3 times. What just happened? Deciding not to think about it, I saw that the girl in white who was at the center of the explosion was walking away and the blonde guy who threw up on the ship was helping Ruby up. I went over to the duo after the blonde guy helped Ruby up. What was that explosion? I asked Ruby, she blushed out of embarrassment before replying. I sorta exploded, she said. Hey, I'm John, the other blonde said. Naruto, I replied, shaking the hand extended to me by him. On Beacon Academy campus, 10:25 AM Naruto's POV. All I'm saying is that motion sickness is a much more common problem than people let on, John said. Look, I'm sorry. Vomit boy was the first thing that came to mind, Ruby giggled. I myself was also chuckling. Oh yeah? What if I called you Crater Face? Or Whiskers? John countered, the last nickname directed at me. I just shrugged my shoulders. Hey, that explosion was an accident. Ruby cried. Meh, I've heard worse, I said. Well, the name's John Arc. Short, sweet, rolls off the tongue ladies love it, John said. Really? I asked. Do they? Ruby asked as well, a bit skeptical. They will. Well, I hope they will. My mom always says that never mind, John replied. Trust me, dude, it won't work, I told him. So I got this thing. Ruby says after a short silence, pulling out Crescent Rose and stabbing it into the ground. Whoa, is that a scythe? John asked. It's also a customizable high-impact sniper rifle, Ruby said proudly. What? John asked, thoroughly confused. It's also a gun, she explained. So, what have you got? Ruby asked John. Oh. John fumbled, pulling out the blade at his side, I got this sword. Ooh. Ruby says in fascination. Yeah, and I've got this shield, too, John says, grabbing his scabbard as it transformed into a shield. So, what do they do? Ruby asked. The shield gets smaller, so when I get tired of carrying it, I can just put it away, John says, transforming his shield back into a scabbard and placing it back at his side. But wouldn't it weigh the same? Ruby questions. Yeah, it does, John says dejectedly, so what about you, Naruto? Well, I got these, I said, referring to the 2 pistols holstered on my side, I pulled one out to examine. They don't use regular bullets, I said, aiming the gun at seemingly nothing, they run on condensed energy that is shot out with a speed equivalent to that of, if not greater than a regular bullet would be. John said confused. It shoots energy, I stated simply. Putting the gun back in its holster, I grabbed the tantum on my side from its sheath and held the blade out for examination. This here is my tantum, it's meant for close combat and I can channel elements through it, I explained, after that I sheathed the short blade and grabbed the cleaver from my back. And this is my greatest creation, I said, hoisting the blade onto my shoulder. It's meant for brute force, like my Tantem. I can also channel the elements through this, and a little extra. What do you mean by that? John asked. That's both John and Ruby leaned in to hear what I had to say, a secret. Both facefaulted at that, causing me to give them the patented Kakashi eye smile. So, Ruby starts, having gotten over her facefault, did you forge them yourself? Of course, I replied. Wait, you made these? John exclaims in disbelief. All students at Signal make their own weapons. Didn't you make yours? Ruby asked. It's a hand-me-down. My great-great-grandfather used it to fight in the war, John says. Sounds more like a family heirloom to me. Well, I like it. Not many people have an appreciation for the classics these days, Ruby says. Yeah, the classics, John says, sheathing his sword. We started walking again, not really knowing where we were headed. So would you help me out back there? In the courtyard? Ruby asks John. Why not? My mom always says, strangers are just friends you haven't met yet, John replies. Hey, where are we going? Ruby asks, realizing we were lost. I don't know, I replied. I was following you guys, John adds, you think there might be a directory? Maybe a food court? Some kind of recognizable landmark? Is that a no? That's a no, Ruby says, slightly laughing. Nope. I said, popping the P. Konoha Mission Room, 3rd POV. Back in Konoha, 3 years had passed since the #1 hyperactive knucklehead ninja was exiled. His exile had lasted only 2 years, and Naruto was expected to return to Konoha and reinstated as a shinobi. Only one problem with that, he didn't return like expected. But they waited and waited and waited, but to no avail, as he had not returned. It hadn't affected the civilian side of the council, but Danzo and the shinobi side were concerned. Konoha's Jinchuriki, as Danzo liked to call Naruto, wasn't in Konoha. They didn't even know where he was, except for a few rumors of an orange blur headed in the direction of Wave Country, but that was over 3 years ago. However, a new rumor on the orange-loving blonde was confirmed true by one of Jiraiya's spies. Right now, if one were to look inside the Konoha Mission Room, they would see a group of people being addressed by the Hokage and her advisors. There were 9 people in total being addressed, all ranked Chunin or above. Starting from left to right, there was a girl with her hair up in chin-style buns, she had steel grey eyes, and wore a long-sleeved white blouse with a high collar and red fastener, puffy pants that looked like a hakama, with the exposed parts of her legs near the waist covered in bandages, and on her back was a large scroll. Next to her was a man that wore a green jumpsuit, orange leg warmers, a zipped-up dark green Konoha flak jacket, bandages were wrapped up around his hands, and a red belt with the Konoha symbol around his waist. He had black bowl-cut hair and thick eyebrows. To his right was a fair-skinned man with long dark brown hair and white pupilless eyes. He wore a white robe with loose sleeves, a dark navy-gray apron tied around his waist, and black shinobi sandals. Next to him was a brown-eyed man with spiky hair similar to that of a pineapple. He wore a flak jacket, along with a long-sleeved black shirt and pants. On the left sleeve of his shirt was a metal plate with the Konoha symbol etched on it. To his right was a man with a robust physique, long spiky brown hair, and black eyes. He wore a red suit with armor with a flak jacket on top. He wore a red Konoha headband on top of his head. Next to him was a girl with light blue eyes and blonde hair that was tied up in a high ponytail, with one flattened bang covering her right eye. She wore a short purple sleeveless blouse, along with an open front purple apron skirt over a black skirt and short fishnet shorts. Next to her was a leather form-fitting black jacket, black pants, shinobi sandals, and headband. With him was a large white fur dog that was the size of a small horse. To the right of the dog was a girl with dark blue waist-length hair, fair skin, and white pupilless eyes. Her outfit consisted of a long-sleeved zip-up lavender and cream jacket, navy blue pants, and low-heeled sandals. Finally, at the end was a tall man wearing black glasses and a knee-length jacket with a hood covering most of his face. The 9 shinobi were 9 of what was known as the Rookie 11. In order of their descriptions, Tenten, Lee, Niji, Shikamaru, Choji, Ino, Kiba and Akamaru, Hinata, and Shino. You have all been called here for an S-rank retrieval mission, Tsunade said, addressing the 9 shinobi in front of her. S-rank retrieval mission? Kiba asked, who would be so hard to retrieve that the mission is S-rank? You know who, we all do, Tsunade replied, causing the 9 to either gasp in surprise, have their eyes widen, or both. There was one person they all knew to be missing. Naruto, Hinata gasped. Her former crush had disappeared over 3 years ago and had not been heard of since. Which, considering how Naruto was, everyone found odd. Many had feared he was killed or worse, captured by the Akatsuki. Yes, Danzo, one of the Hokage's advisors, replied, according to Jiraiya-sen's spy network, the Akatsuki are making their move in capturing the Jinchuriki. Your mission is to find and escort Naruto back to Konoha. Failure is not an option, Tsunade finished in a serious tone. In addition to your retrieval team, you will be accompanied by two of my best men, Danzo added, Yamato and Sai. What? Why should we even bring your rude Anbu along with us? Kiba exclaimed outraged. Yamato has the ability of the Shodaime Hokage, first Hokage, Mokuton, wood release. And Sai has the ability of the Bokuton, ink release. Both are very adept in their abilities, Danzo explained, his eyes slightly narrowing. Focus, Tsunade said, from what we've discovered, Naruto went in the direction of Vale, start your search from there, and so on, good luck. And bring back Naruto. Aye, Hokage-sama, was said by the 9 as they walked out the room. Hokage-sama, might I ask why you didn't send the other members of Team 7 as well? Danzo asked. You and I both know that they'd charge straight on if they found out it was Naruto, at least the rest of the Rookie 11 would retain their common sense, Tsunade replied. I see, Danzo said. I hope you're fine, Naruto, wherever you are. Tsunade thought. Naruto's dream world, time. Unknown, Naruto's POV. I had just fallen asleep after finding where the orientation was and just in time to hear Ozpin's speech towards this year's freshmen. We then were told that we would all rest in the room we were currently in. And so, I fell asleep as usual. Only this time, I didn't have the same dreams I usually had. No, this wasn't my usual dream where a giant bowl of ramen did the caramel dancing. In front of me was pitch black. Nothing else other than glowing crystals of all colors and 2 fireballs that were blue and red. Suddenly, lightning struck out of nowhere, flashing every now and then, revealing certain images that I couldn't comprehend. The images I saw, though I couldn't clearly see what was happening, were of 2 small white blurs, one surrounded by a rainbow of colors, the other by red and blue. And above them was a giant red eye. It was the only thing I could see clearly. It had 4 rings that went from the center pupil, along with 9 tomo. When I stared at it, I was filled with fear as if I was looking at something worse than death. Suddenly, the one red eye turned into 2 purple eyes with 4 rings in each, and no tomo. Unlike the one red eye, which was filled with rage, these eyes felt calm. You will face many trials, young one, a mysterious deep male voice said, but above all, you must break the cycle. And with that, my dream got even weirder. Beacon Academy, 7:42 AM Naruto's POV. I woke up from my strange dream, feeling refreshed for the rest of the day. Blinking a few times, I saw that an enthusiastic orange-haired girl was talking with a guy who had a highlight of magenta in his hair. I stretched out a bit, my fox ears and tail slightly twitching. Today was initiation, many people were wondering who they'll be teamed with. Me, I wasn't worried at all. Hopefully I would be teamed up with Ruby or Yang or some other nice people, and not some arrogant jerks. I already dealt with Sasuke, I don't need to deal with a Sasuke too. 0. I packed a sleeping bag that everyone was given for the first night, ate the cafeteria pancakes for breakfast, and brushed my teeth. All the while that cheerful orange-haired girl was talking to the guy with the magenta highlight. That all took about an hour to do. I didn't have to go to the weapons locker room, considering I had my weapons sealed onto my personnel. How did you get your weapons? I didn't see you go to the weapons locker room, John asked me as we walked to the designated area Professor Ozpin told all freshmen to go to. Trade secret, I said, slightly smirking. Emerald Forest Cliffside, 9:10 AM. For years, you have trained to become warriors, and today, your abilities will be evaluated in the Emerald Forest, Ozpin stated. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard rumors about the assignment of teams. Well, allow us to put an end to your confusion. Each of you will be given teammates today, Glinda added. What? Oh, I heard Ruby murmur in concern. These teammates will be with you for the rest of your time here at Beacon. So it is in your best interest to be paired with someone with whom you can work well, Ozpin said. Hearing this, Ruby groaned as did a few others. That being said, the first person you make eye contact with after landing will be your partner for the next 4 years. What? Ruby exclaimed in panic. See? I told you, the orange-haired girl started. Ozpin had cut her off before she could continue speaking. After you've been partnered up, make your way to the northern end of the forest. You will meet opposition along the way. Do not hesitate to destroy everything in your path or you will die. This caused John to laugh nervously before gulping loudly. You will be monitored and graded through the duration of your initiation, but our instructors will not intervene. You will find an abandoned temple at the end of the path containing several relics. Each pair must choose one and return to the top of the cliff. You will guard that item, as well as your standing, and grade you appropriately. Are there any questions? Yeah, sir. John asked hesitantly, raising his hand. Good. Now, take your positions. Ozpin said. I looked at my surroundings, seeing near the left end of the line we were all in was the girl with mint green hair I saw earlier. Next to her was the monkey Franus and the horse Franus. Then there was the black-haired girl with a katana on her back and a bow in her hair, the white-haired girl with a rapier, the red-eyed girl holding a spear, a guy with a light green mohawk, the cheerful orange-haired girl with a grenade launcher on her back, the guy with the magenta highlights was holding green pistol knives in his hands, an arrogant light brown-haired man in armor, Yang, Ruby. John, and finally at the end was me. Everyone was getting in their fighting stances, except for John who still had his hand raised. Soon enough, the mechanical platforms we were on started ejecting people into the forest, starting with the left. Sir? I've got a question, John asks, not noticing that the number of students being ejected was increasing, so, this landing strategy thing what is it? You're, like, dropping us off or something? No. You will be falling, Osborne answered. Oh, I see, so did you, like, hand out parachutes for us? John asked as more students were thrown into the forest. No. You will be using your own landing strategy. Yeah, whilst John was still talking, the orange-haired girl and the guy with the magenta highlight were launched into the forest. Woohoo! I heard Yang exclaim as she was launched into the air, followed by Ruby. So, what exactly is a landing strategy? John exclaimed as he was launched into the air. I looked ahead as I prepared myself for the launching. A smirk appeared on my face as I was launched. Let's do this, Dadabayo. I exclaimed as I was finally launched. As I was in midair, I was able to see Professor Osborne standing there, watching us being launched whilst drinking his coffee. Unknown location, third POV. The Kazu, you and Hayden will go after the NarutoxRWBY. Sasori, you and Dadara will go after the NarutoxRWBY. And finally, Itachi, you and Kisame will go to the land beyond the Oki no Okinet and retrieve the NarutoxRWBY. Understood. A mysterious figure said. What stood out about this silhouette was the purple gray eyes that had 4 rings in them. Hi, Leader Sama, was the chorus of responses. One by one, the group of mysterious figures disappeared until there were 4 left. The one with the purple gray eyes turned to one of the few remaining people left. And you're sure that the NarutoxRWBY is beyond the Oki no Okinet? The figure asked. Are you questioning the extent of my knowledge? The other mysterious figure threatened more than asked. No, but I'm curious as to how you know of this land beyond the Oki no Okinet. Humph, I've seen many things in my lifetime, Nagato. Is that all? Yes, Madara-sama. Good. And with that, 2 more of the mysterious figure disappeared. Leaving only 2. You know he can't be trusted, Nagato. I know, Conan, but we have 2 for now. The forest seemed calm, it was an early morning. The sun had just come up the horizon, the morning dew still clung to patches of grass, as the forest appeared to gleam a shiny green, much like the color of an emerald, hence the name of the forest. The black bird was chirping, out in the sky flying. The time of day, added with the position of lighting, gave the bird a majestic look to it. Suddenly, a red and black blur zipped right through the black bird as it gave a final shriek and was replaced with a burst of feathers. Birdie, no. Ruby cried out as she fell down into the forest. As she was falling she fired off a few rounds from her side, crescent rows, in an attempt to slow her fall speed. Seeing that she had yet to slow down to an appropriate speed, she changed crescent rows out of its sniper form into a giant red side and caught the blade on one of the tree's branches. At the same time, the white-haired girl, whose name was found to be Weiss-Schnee, hopped from a white snowflake she had summoned with her rapier. The black-haired boy with the magenta highlight, Lyren, descended whilst spinning in the air and used his twin trench knife pistols to spiral down the trunk of a large tree and hit the ground. Brushing the dust off his clothes, he looked up just in time to see the yellow blur that was Yang flying through the air. Woohoo! Yeah. Al-Ayub. Yang exclaimed as she flew through the air. Using her dual-ranged shot gauntlets, Ember Celica, to shoot herself further and further north until she finally crashed through the leaves of a tree, only to leap from 2 trunks and tumble to the ground. Nailed it! She exclaimed. The girl with red hair that wore Spartan-like armor, Puranikos, had just landed on a high tree branch. Switching her weapon from a blade into a rifle, she looked through the scope and evaluated her surroundings. Off in the distance, Pura saw Flailing John screaming as he fell helplessly. Switching her rifle once again, only this time into a spear, she pulled her right hand back ready to throw the spear, whilst her left hand was used to aim her throw. It only took a moment for her to aim until she threw the spear across the air. Thunk! Was the resonating sound of said spear impaling itself into a tree. Thank you. John cried out in the distance. I'm sorry. Pura replied whilst waving. The monkey Faunus had landed on a tree branch and in a feat that normally seemed impossible, jumped from the branch to another nearly half a kilometer away and kept on doing the same thing until he landed on the ground below. The horse Faunus was hopping from tree branch to tree branch. After jumping roughly a kilometer north, he suddenly jumped from the branch he was on to the ground below, creating a spiderweb crater as he impacted against the ground. About time you got here, the monkey Faunus said. Oh, shut up, Rashi, you aren't exactly the easiest person to find, the now identified Rashi just scoffed in annoyance. Did you find Fu? I was able to sense her near the other one, Rashi replied. That seems coincidental, don't you think? The horse Franus asked. I've seen many things, Han, and I've learned from experience that people like us just seem to be trouble magnets. With Ruby's POV. Gotta find Yang. Gotta find Yang, gotta find Yang, gotta find, I thought as she frantically searched for her sister. Yang. Yang. I exclaimed, hoping that she was nearby. Oh, this is bad, this is really bad. What if I can't find her? I thought. If I couldn't find her in time, I had to consider my other options. Well, there's John. He's nice. He's funny. I considered, I don't think he's very good in a fight, though. A mental image of a cartoon version of John came to mind fighting Beelds. It didn't end very well for him as he was assaulted by the Beelds. Ooh. What about Blake? So mysterious, so calm, plus she likes books. Then again, I'm not sure I'd be able to hold a conversation with her. Ugh. Another mental image came to mind, only this time it was a cartoon version of Blake. She was walking away from a cartoon version of me as I talked to her whilst she moved further away from me. Then there's Naruto, I thought, a small noticeable blush appearing on my face. If I couldn't find Yang, maybe I'd find Naruto. Yeah, me and Naruto. Maybe if we're on the same team we'll get even closer and then. I shook my head of the daydreams, I was going off track with my train of thought. Okay, who else do I know in this school? There's Yang, Naruto, John, Blake, and. Time seemed to slow down as I skidded to a halt as I approached a clearing with a familiar girl with white hair and a rapier. I stopped just in time for our eyes to meet, followed by a pregnant pause. Her eyes were light blue and had a cold, calculating feel to them. All of a sudden, Weiss turns on her heel and walks away from me. Shaken out of my musings, I moved forward a bit. Wait. Where are you going? I exclaimed. I stopped and kicked the ground, slightly dejected. We're supposed to be teammates. I followed Weiss for another few meters before we heard another voice. Come on, come on. Stupid, I heard John exclaim as he struggled to free himself from the spear lodged in his hood. As he saw Weiss, he gave an embarrassed wave. Weiss simply headed back in the direction she came from, causing John to groan in dejection. By no means does this make us friends, she stated as she dragged me by my hood. You came back. I exclaimed cheerfully. But John, third POV. Wait. Come back. Who's going to get me down from here? John exclaimed as the two girls went further and further away from him. John? Came a female voice from below him. John looked down to see the owner of the spear that was currently embedded in his hood, Purr, looking up at his predicament. Do you have any spots left on your team? The red-headed girl asked. Very funny, John said, crossing his arms. Eventually looking down at her and gave a smile, which she returned. Emerald Forest cliffside. Here we find two people standing on the cliff, Glinda and Osban. The latter taking a sip of his coffee as he looked at his tablet that shown each student during their initiation. Nothing said a good morning like a cup of espresso and launching your students into a forest filled with deadly monsters. Of course, that's not to say that the instructors on the ground wouldn't assist if necessary, as they didn't want any of the students actually dead before they graduated. All was quiet as the duo watched the students search for partners and head towards the northern ruins of the forest, until suddenly a beeping sound was heard from one of the comlinks the instructors all had. The only time one of those went off was if a student wasn't able to pass initiation, or. What is it? Osban asked as he held his index and middle fingers on his left hand to his ear, which held his comlink. Sir. Something's happened. A frantic voice of an instructor yelled through the link. What exactly do you mean by that? Osban asked calmly. There's an unknown signature that appeared in the forest scanning area. Hearing this, Osban raised his left brow in confusion. It could be just a flying type Grim, Osban countered. No, you don't understand. When I say it appeared in the forest, I mean it literally just appeared right in front of me. Both Glinda and Osban's eyes widened at that. It's not every day that an unknown signature appeared in the forest they know like the back of their hands. Can you give us a clear visual of the creature? Glinda asked. Yeah, I think I can, give me a second, the man said. Soon enough, a larger screen popped up from the center of the screens that shown the students. The image shown was a camera with a few leaves at the bottom of the screen. What was the main focus of their attention was the creature they were seeing. The creature had a long, dark purple serpent-like body, yet it resembled a leech. The fact that its body wasn't a midnight black like all other Grim was odd in itself. It also had 5 red hair-like strands sprouting from its face, and it had a no mask on its face with a weird symbol that wasn't recognizable. What is that thing? Glinda asked worriedly. I don't know, it looks like some sort of leech or maybe a serpent. Suddenly, the leech started to sniff around, as if it were searching for something. After sniffing the air for 30 seconds, it took off in a general direction. Sir. The beast is. It's headed north, Ozpin finished. But the only thing that's north is Glinda started, eyes slightly widened by the end of her statement. Sir, just give the order and I can. No, we cannot interfere unless it succeeds in attacking the students. Hopefully it won't come to that, Ozpin thought as he watched the beast's retreating form. Emerald Forest, Naruto's POV. I landed on a high branch after making my landing, pushing chakra into my feet as I jumped from branch to branch, each one descending to the ground until finally I landed on the ground itself. Looking around at my surroundings, I saw I was in a small clearing with a few patches of grass lying around, the vast green extended out into the distant horizon. Hey QBE, can you sense anyone nearby? I mentally asked the QBE. I learned over the years that since the QBE shared senses with me, it can also sense out energy signatures. Yeah sure, whatever. Just give me a sec, the QBE responded. It took a few moments before I got a response. Head north by northeast, I sense an energy signature there. Nodding my head, I headed in the direction the QB told me, and soon enough I came across another person. A familiar face. Yo. I yelled, it was the girl who had the mint green hair. I gave her a lazy wave as she saw me. Hey. Aren't you the guy who had the motion sickness? She asked, which made me fault. At least I didn't throw up, I countered. So, I started, deciding to change the subject. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you, she stated, I'm Fu. Likewise, I said. I looked north, attempting to see any signs of the ruins we were told to go to. We should probably start heading north, I stated, beginning to walk north. Yeah. We started walking north, an awkward silence between us for most of the journey. So, what kind of weapons do you got there? I asked her, attempting to break the awkward silence. Well, these two are tonfa gun hybrids, she replied, pulling out her weird-looking tonfas. What about you? Well, I got these guns and 2 blades, I simply stated, nudging to my blades at my side and on my back and the guns in my hands. Do they transform into anything? She asked. No, but they can control the elements, I replied. Neither of us talked, this would be a long journey. With Yang, third POV. Here we find Yang searching for her sister, poking through the bushes in a curious manner. Hello? She called out, is anyone out there? Hello? I'm getting bored here. Suddenly there was a rustling noise coming from the bushes behind her. Is someone there? She called out in an attempt to get an answer. Soon enough she pokes her head through the source of the noise. Ruby, is that you? The response she got was a low, inhuman growl as she raised her head to look at the source of the sound. Nope. Yang quickly rolls to the side as an Ursa charges out of the green. She gets up and activates her Ember Celica, staring at the monster before another Ursa runs out behind her. She leaps over it and its companion runs at her again, only to get knocked back by a fiery punch. The other Ursa and Yang charge at each other and Yang manages to get under it and deliver several punches and a kick to send the creature back. You guys wouldn't have happened to have seen a girl in a red hood, would you? She asked. The Ursi merely growled at her, you could just say no. Suddenly, one of the Ursi stands on its legs and swipes at her twice, Yang barely dodging the attacks. After dodging the attacks, she merely laughed. Geez, you two couldn't hit the broadside of a bow. Before she could complete her insult towards the beasts, a single strand of her golden hair falls in front of her face and lands on the forest floor. If there was one thing that a person should always remember around Yang, it's to not cut her hair. She started, her eyes being covered by the shadow cast down by her hair and her hair splitting into 9 different clusters that seemed to float around despite gravity, only for her to look up, her once violet eyes now red and filled with rage. You monsters. An inferno surrounds Yang for a moment and she rockets forward, unleashing a devastating combo of flaming hits and blows on the offending Ursa, making it fly through several burning trees. The other monster runs over, but stops short at Yang's gaze, while a tree falls to the ground behind her. What? You want some? Yang yelled at the petrified beast. No matter what species, the saying always goes, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The Ursa prepared to strike, but suddenly a whirling noise was heard from behind the beast and it makes a befuddled noise, falling down a second later to reveal Blake with her katana, Gamble Shroud, in the beast's back. Yang pants in exhaustion while Blake recalled her weapon back to her hand, sheathing it on her back and smiled to the side. Yang, her eyes now back to their usual violet, only scoff. I could have taken him. With Ruby and Weiss. What was that? That should have been easy. Ruby exclaimed, both her and Weiss having recently escaped an encounter with a pack of beowulfs. Well, perhaps if you had exercised even the slightest amount of caution with the placement of your strikes, I wouldn't have set the forest on fire. Weiss countered, causing Ruby to scoff. What's that supposed to mean? Ruby cried out. I'm surprised someone who talks so much would communicate so little during an encounter. Well, I'm sorry you need my help to win a fight. I'm just fine on my own. Well, congratulations on being the strongest child to sneak your way into Beacon. Bravo. Y started walking away yet again. Ruby, with an agitated shriek, unfolds crescent rose, slices a tree down to the stump, refolds it back, and follows her partner as the tree crashes behind her. Neither noticing the large dark feather floating onto the fallen trunk behind them. But John and Purah. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Purah and John made their way north. As they walked, John hears a noise far away. Did you hear that? John asked his partner. Gunfire. It seems some of our comrades have encountered the enemy, Purah replied. The two continued moving forward, John still staring at the direction the sound came from and not noticing Purah raise a branch to pass by. Said branch is accidentally released just in time to hit John in the face, flooring him instantly. John. I'm sorry. Purah exclaims as she looked behind to see him get hit by the branch. It's okay. Just a scratch. John said lightheartedly, getting back up from his fall as Purah approached him. Why didn't you activate your aura? Purah asked. Huh? John replied, not entirely sure on what the answer to her question was. Your aura, Purah clarified. The Sundite, John replied. John, do you know what aura is? Purah asked. PSCH. Of course I do. Do you know what aura is? John countered, waving the question off and avoiding eye contact. But Ren insert John and Purah voice over. Here we find a male teenager with long black hair with a magenta streak in it, tied up in a ponytail, wearing a dark green, diagonally buttoned long-sleeved tailcoat with black and gold trimming. Currently, we find said person, Lai Ren, trekking through the forest's tall grass. Aura is the manifestation of our soul. It bears our burdens and shield our hearts. Have you ever felt you were being watched without knowing that someone was there? The voice of Purah asked John. At the same time she asked him that question, Ren sneezed for no apparent reason. Yeah. Ren suddenly stops and narrows his eyes, looking around him, while a huge black grim serpent rises up from the grass behind him and quickly surrounds him with its large hissing body. Ren adopts a sighting stance as the snake coils together in front of him and attacks with its long fangs. With practice, our aura can be our shield. Everyone has it, even animals. Purah said as she walked around John. What about monsters? John asked. No. The monsters we fight lack a soul. They are creatures of Grim, the manifestation of anonymity. Purah replied. Meanwhile, Ren was fighting the snake-like creature. The snake's mouth hit the ground as it tried to attack Ren, instantly coming up again as Ren leapt out of its way and hitting said person with its snout. He landed in a crouch and brought out his stormflower as the serpent prepared to attack again. They are the darkness and we are the light. Purah finished. Right, that's why we fight them. John exclaimed as Ren kicked the snake's snout and slashed at its head. It's not about why, it's about knowing. The snake flows around Ren and tries to bite him again, but he flips over it and drives his weapons into its head, pausing a moment without sensing the serpent's white head behind him. Understanding dark and light helps us manifest our aura. Everyone has some of both. Ren turns and looks up at the white head as it launches itself at him, dodging it and landing just in time to see the head slither towards him. As it gets closer, he runs at it and leaps onto the black head, sliding over its body and blasting the other head. By bearing your soul outward as a force, you can deflect harm. All of our tools and equipment are conduits for aura. You protect yourself and your soul when fighting. Purah continued. Ren was caught unprepared as the white half attacked him, hitting his head and knocking him off as he dropped his weapons and leaving him to merely raise his arms and distantly cry no. To the mouth of the black head. It's like a force field. John said in revelation. Yes, if you want to look at it that way. Purah replied. Ren is now holding the front fangs of the colossal snake in his hands, glowing a faint pulsating pink as he grips the teeth and yanks them from the monster's mouth, causing it to flail away. It attempts to bite him again, but Ren spins to the side and stabs a fang into its eye, rotating his arm to deliver a final blow that drives the makeshift weapon's equals into its skull, which ripples, expands, and blows apart in a dark mess as its headless body falls over its fellow creature. Wasting no time, Ren runs right at the white head. Back with John and Purah. Now, close your eyes and concentrate. Purah told John, walking up to him and touching the side of his head. Okay. John complied. Purah smiled and closed her own eyes, opening them as her skin glows and her eyes shrink before shutting them again. The two stood there, now with Purah glowing a faint red and John a bright white. For it is in passing that we achieve immortality. Through this, we become a paragon of virtue and glory to rise above all, infinite in distance and unbound by death. Purah mentally said as she placed her hand on his chest. I release your soul, and by my shoulder protect thee. She finished, her red glow disappearing and hunching over in tiredness. Purah? John asked in concern, still glowing. It's alright. I used my aura to unlock yours, but the energy that protects you now is your own, she replied as she got back up, grinning as she watched a scratch close up and vanish. You have a lot of it. Wow. John said, smiling and looking at his hands as the glow disappeared. After a minute, the two realized just how close their bodies were to each other. Both had a blush spread across their faces as they stood there just looking away from the other. Back with Ren. At the same time, Ren stood atop of the body of his enemy, sliding the weapons into his sleeves and brushing them off before a strange animal-like noise was heard above him twice. Looking up, he saw his childhood friend looking at him as she was upside down, hanging from a low-lying tree branch. I still don't think that's what a sloth sounds like. Ren sighed, nevertheless smiling at her shenanigans. In response, Nor gave him a boop. On the nose. Side story start. The Maelstrom Hunter remnants of the past. Art I Princess Kaguya. Long ago, before the Shinobi World Wars, before the Frontis War, before the days of the Clan Wars, before the days of darkness, before those days, there was no chakra or aura in Shinobi or hunters. No, before those days, the earth was of one, unified land. United by the earth, but divided by conflict. There were three main factions, each ruled by a different leader. Firstly, the oldest of the three factions was led by King Arthur, who was a fair and just king to his people. Secondly, there was Pharaoh Scorpion, who was the warmonger of the three, having already conquered over the lands ruled by Hammurabi and by Qin Shi Huang, and was at war with the last two factions. And finally, the youngest of the three factions was led by Princess Kaguya, who was kind, yet ruled with an iron fist. Now, as said before, there was a war between the factions. Pharaoh Scorpion fought against King Arthur and Princess Kaguya. The pharaoh's armies had proven their worth in battle, defeating nearly all of Arthur and Kaguya's armies. And now, said army was headed towards Princess Kaguya's capital city-state, Kyoto. What made the situation more grim was the fact that Kaguya's army was outnumbered. For every one soldier Kaguya had, there were 20 of scorpions. But, desperate times call for desperate measures. As here we find the pale-skinned, red-haired Shinto princess at the base of a divine being. The origin of this being is unknown, only known by the elder advisors of King Arthur, who are very unsure of its origins themselves. But what is known is that said divine being took the form of a massive tree. Its trunk spanning 10 miles in diameter, standing higher than the clouds themselves. At the peak of the tree there was a massive flower that had blossomed. And hidden behind the cover of those petals was a giant eye. Its color was a crimson red and had 4 concentric rings with 9 tomo, 3 tomo on 3 of the rings closest to the cornea. The divine tree, just like any tree, bears fruit. But the fear of its power stopped any of the 3 kingdoms from consuming its fruit. That is, until now. As Princess Kaguya approached the base of the divine tree, she dropped to her knees and gave a silent quick prayer to the gods to help her defend her capital. After she was done, she moved to the base of the tree and picked off one of the low-lying fruit from its branches. She then proceeded to do what none before her had done, she consumed the fruit of the Shinju tree. Feeling the power of the divine being course through her veins, her appearance changed. From on top of her head sprouted 2 horn-like appendages that resembled that of a moon rabbit. Her once royal purple eyes turned a bright white, giving her a divine aura, and a third eye appeared in the center of her forehead, opening to reveal the eye that the Shinju had hidden behind its massive petals. Standing back up from her kneeling position in front of the divine tree, she turned around and walked back towards her palace. With the power of the Shinju in tow, she would defend her kingdom from its invaders and bring forth peace. The last pair has been formed, sir. Glinda said to Osmond as they watched Lai and Nora on their tablets. Poor boy, I can't possibly imagine those two getting along. Still, he's probably better off than Miss Nikos. Osmond said as he drank his espresso. I don't care what his transcripts say. That John fellow is not ready for this level of combat. I guess we'll find out soon enough. At their current pace, they should reach the temple within just a few minutes. I guess we'll find out soon enough. At their current pace, they should reach the temple within just a few minutes. Speaking of which, what did you use as relics this year? You'll find out soon enough. What of the unknown Grim? Osmond asked. We're still following it, but none of our instructors on the ground can identify what kind of creature it is, she replied as she tapped on her tablet to show the screen that followed the leech-like creature. Suddenly, as they were watching the creature, it stopped. The leech Grim just stopped right where it was and sniffed the air for a few seconds, then disappeared in a blur, much to the shock of the duo. What was that? Glinda exclaimed. John. What just happened? Osmond yelled at the instructor tasked with following the creature. I don't know. John replied back, sounding quite panicked. It just disappeared. Find it? Osmond retorted, a frown covering his face. This was very troubling. First, there was this unknown Grim that appeared seemingly out of nowhere, then it just disappeared as they were tracking it. Now this Grim was loose in the forest, where the students were, and had just disappeared from their surveillance. With Naruto and Fu. Do you even know where you're going? Fu asked as the duo traveled through the lush green forest. Of course I do, Naruto replied, we're going to the ruined thingies that Professor Oz told us to go to. And how do you know it's even in this direction? Fu questioned. Because I'm awesome to Bayo. Naruto exclaimed, puffing out his chest in pride. That isn't really a good reason. Fu stated, causing Naruto to deflate, his pride slightly wounded. So, do you know anyone else in the academy? Naruto asked, trying to keep the conversation going. Yeah, 3 other people, Fu replied, there's Han Irakama, he may look intimidating cause of his height, but he's pretty nice once you get to know him. Then there's Rashiyama's Araku, he's a bit goofy and one hell of a prankster. And finally, there's Blake, she's quite, but nice and a good friend. What about you? You know anyone else in this place? Well, there's John Ark, he's a nice guy, but seems a bit nervous. Then I know Yang Xiaolong, she's a good friend, just don't mess with her hair. And then there's Ruby Rose, Naruto said that last name with a small, but noticeable, blush on his face, she's kind, sweet, cute, and a big fan of weapons. This, Ruby Rose you speak of, do you have a crush on her? Fu asked, noticing the blush that Naruto had when he mentioned Ruby's name. Why would you think that? Naruto asked innocently, not noticing the comical sweat drop appear on Fu's head. He's not that dense, is he? She thought, taking another glance at the look of innocence on his face, I can't believe it, he is that dense. Never mind. Fu quickly said, promising to help those two get together. Unknown to her, she was not the only one who was currently trying to get Naruto and Ruby together, nor would she be the last to try. But Han and Rashi. We find the Jinchuriki duo arriving at what was most likely the ruins that Professor Ozpin had told them to go to. The area looked like the remains of a rotunda, with 5 stone columns that stood tall, while 4 other columns lay broken and scattered. The floor of the structure bore a symmetrical design, behind the temple ruins was a stone pillar-lined walkway that led to a staircase that went down a chasm. At the edge of the floor's symmetrical design were 24 pedestals, each held either a black or gold chess piece that were in clusters of 2 of the same, one black and the other gold. You know, I expected this mystery item to be something else. Rashi said to his partner. Well, what exactly were you expecting? Han asked rhetorically. A few jewels and golden idols hooked up to booby traps that involved darts, decapitating axes, and giant boulders. Rashi replied. It was a rhetorical question. Han deadpanned. It was. Never mind, let's just grab one of these pieces. Rashi said, heading to the nearest pedestal. He grabbed a black king piece hesitantly, as if expecting a giant boulder to drop out of the sky and drop on him. Seeing as nothing happened when he grabbed the chess piece, he went back to his partner, a smirk plastered on his face. Well, that was a bit anticlimactic. Han said. Yeah, it was, Rashi said, maybe we should wait and see who else comes along. Sure, sound good. Han replied before the duo leapt into the nearest tree to wait and observe the other students. With Ruby and Weiss. It's definitely this way, Weiss said, walking right, but stopped and started walking left, I mean this way. It's definitely this way, alright, it's official. We passed it. Weiss, why can't you just admit that you have no idea where we're going? Ruby asked, slightly annoyed. Because I know exactly where we're going. We're going to the forest temple. Weiss exclaimed frustratingly, causing Ruby to sigh in frustration as well. Oh, stop it. You don't know where we are, either. Weiss countered. Well, at least I'm not pretending like I know everything. Ruby retorted. What is that supposed to mean? Weiss asked, getting more and more angry. It means you're a big stupid jerk and I hate you. Just keep moving. Weiss said, walking in another direction. Oh, just keep moving. Hurry up. Wah. Watch where you're going. Ruby said in a faux imitation of Weiss's voice, going back to her regular voice, why are you so bossy? I'm not bossy. Don't say things like that. Weiss exclaimed as she turned around to face Ruby. Stop treating me like a kid. Ruby exclaimed. Stop acting like a kid. Weiss countered. Well, stop acting like you're perfect. I'm not perfect. Not yet, but I'm still leagues better than you. Weiss stated and started walking away. You don't even know me, Ruby said dejectedly. With Yang and Blake. Coming out of the forest, Yang and Blake stepped out into the clearing that held the ancient temple ruins. Moving closer to the temple ruins, they saw the pedestals that held the chess pieces, 5 of the pedestals were missing pieces. Think this is it? Yang asked Blake, causing said girl to give Yang an incredulous look and head down the hill, Yang not far behind. They walked across the floor and observed the items they now recognized as chess pieces. Chess pieces? Blake questioned, confused. Some of them are missing. Looks like we weren't the first ones here. Yang stated, finally noticing that several of the pedestals had missing chess pieces. Well, I guess we should pick one. Blake said. Yang said as she studied the golden knight, picking it up and showing it to Blake. How about a cute little pony? Sure. Blake said, slightly smirking. They walked to the center of the temple floor. That wasn't too hard. Yang exclaimed. Well, it's not like this place is very difficult to find. Blake said as they shared a smile. But John and Purah. John and Purah looked into the mouth of a dark cave, stalagmites and stalactites littered around the cave. Inside the cave, unknown to the duo, was a cave drawing depicting two men, one held a staff with a circle on the top end, and the other held an also-familiar sword. Both were apparently fighting a giant beast that was depicted to have 10 tie-like appendages and a single red eye. Think this is it? John asked as they entered the cave, moving along with a makeshift torch that John was able to make before they entered the cave. I'm not sure this is it. Purah said once they were inside the cave. Purah, I made a torch, could you at least humor me for, like, 5 more feet? John sighed. Soon enough, the duo came across the cave drawings. You have any idea what these drawings are? John asked his partner. It looks to be about 1,000 or so years old, but I don't know what these drawings are supposed to mean. Purah replied. As the two continued further into the cave, John tripped on the ground, the torch flying out of his hand and into a small puddle, extinguishing the flame, so the two were cast in darkness with only their eyes visible. Do you feel that? Purah asked as John got up grumbling. Soul-crushing regret. John said. No, it's warm, Purah said. The pair continued onward through the cave until they saw a large glowing point of gold right in front of them, illuminating John's excited features. That's the relic. John exclaimed as he reached out to grab it, only for the object to move away from his swipe. Hey. Bad relic. He tries to get it again, then jumps forward and hangs onto it as the object raises him above the ground. Gotcha. He exclaimed as they finally caught the golden object. John, Purah asked worried as John's catch lowered itself, so he was dangling in front of the now glowing red lines and eyes of a death stalker. But Naruto and Fu. I think this is the right place. Naruto said as they came into the clearing with the ruins of an ancient temple. Hopefully it is. Fu said. The two looked around to see their two friends in the center. Oh hi Yang. Naruto shouted out, waving to Yang. Naruto. Good to see you're still alive, Yang shouted back as Naruto and Fu got closer to the center. Naruto went over to take one of the chess pieces, specifically the Golden King, while Fu went over to talk with Blake. Good to see you're still alive, Fu. Blake said smiling. Right back at you, Blake. Fu said with a similar smile. Hey Fu. A voice from behind her said. She turned around to see Han and Rashi leaping from a nearby tree onto the ground near her. Han. Rashi. It's good to see you. Fu said to the duo. Suddenly, a girlish scream could be heard from far away, causing all to look in the direction the noise came from. Some girl is in trouble. Blake, did you hear that? Yang exclaimed to her partner. No, I'm pretty sure that was John. Naruto said with a deadpan look. Are you sure? That sounded like a girl's scream. Fu pointed out. Trust me, that was John. Naruto said. With John and Purah. At the cave entrance, Purah was rushing out right as the large dark scorpion-like creature of Grim known as a Death Stalker crashed through the hole, roaring and waving its grass-encrusted claws as John hung from its stinger. Help. Whoa Why? Purah. Help. Purah, this is not the relic. It's not. John exclaimed as he continued sobbing whilst being thrown around. Do something. John. Whatever you do, don't let. Before she could finish her sentence, the Death Stalker hurled its tail back and launched the still screaming John across the forest. She could only watch in dismay. Go. Turning back to the creature in front of her, she smiled embarrassingly and rushed away after John, the creature following in pursuit, snapping its claws at the retreating form of Purah. With Ruby and Weiss. Ruby? I told you this was a bad idea. Weiss exclaimed as they hung from the side of a large dark bird. Grim. We're fine. Stop worrying. Ruby said loudly, trying to be casual about it. I am so far beyond worrying. In a good way. In a bad way. In a very bad way. How did we even get in this situation in the first place? Well, why don't we just jump? Ruby asked, ignoring Weiss's question. What are you? Insane, Weiss said, only to notice that Ruby had already disappeared. Oh, you insufferable little red. With Naruto, Fu, Yang, Blake, Han, and Rashi. Hey, did you hear that? What should we do? Yang said. What are you talking about? Naruto asked, looking up to see a red and black blur falling from the sky, getting closer and closer. Heads, ooh, the free-falling form of Ruby said, just as she crashed into Naruto. The two fell with Naruto onto Ruby. Oog, what hit me? Naruto asked, little Uzumaki swirls in his eyes, finally shaking the headache he got. He looked up only for his cerulean blue eyes to meet a pair of celestial silver ones. Both Naruto and Ruby were speechless as they gazed into each other's eyes with a heavy blush on both of their faces. They stayed that way for a good minute, but to them it felt like an eternity. "You two lovebirds done yet?" Yang teased. Said individuals were sputtering to come up with a comeback and got off of each other, their blushes still prominent on their faces and avoiding the other's eyes. It was then and here that the rest of the rookies became part of a betting ring each week, where people would place bets on what day those two would hook up. It had yet to happen, but it had become a very big thing behind the duo's back, Yang being the dealer with everyone's betting money. "Sorry about that," Ruby finally said to Naruto. It's okay, no big deal," Naruto replied. Suddenly, a blonde blur rushed by through the sky. "Hey John. Watch out for that tree." Naruto couldn't finish as John collided with the nearby tree trunk. Suddenly, several crashing noises are heard in the forest ahead of them, and an Ursa comes out, claws swiping, just as a pink blast of energy hits it in the back and it crashes to the ground, depositing its orange-haired rider. "Eehow," Nora said, rolling off the creature's back and getting up with a groan, all wits broken. She finished as she dashed onto its neck and observed the carcass as Ren came up from behind her. "Nora. Please don't ever do that again," Ren said, panting and leaning on the monster. Looking up again, he noticed the pink dotted outline of where his partner should be and looked to see she had run off again. "Ooh," Nora said, picking up a golden rook piece. "I'm queen of the castle. I'm queen of the castle," she chanted in a sing-song voice whilst dancing around. "Nora," Ren exclaimed. "Humming, Ren," Nora said, skipping off to her friend. "Did that girl just ride in on an Ursa?" Blake questioned her partner. Before Yang could finish, she was interrupted by the sound of a screech from their right. Looking to where the sound came from, they saw Purah running to the temple with a Death Stalker right behind her. "John!" Purah exclaims, seeing her partner up in the tree. "Purah!" John exclaimed as well, waving at his partner. "Ruby." Yang. Nora. Naruto. Those last two were spoken by said people, interrupting what was supposed to be a hug between sisters. "Did she just run all the way here with a Death Stalker on her tail?" Blake questioned, Yang getting angrier and angrier, bursting into a small fire, her hair splitting into 9 bunches and seemingly defying the laws of gravity. "I can't take it anymore. Can everyone just chill out for 2 seconds before something crazy happens again?" Yang exclaimed. A small silence was heard as everyone stood awkwardly waiting for Yang to cool down, Ren running over to a ditzy Nora and Blake, Fu, Han, Naruto, Rashi and Ruby looking up. Yang," Ruby said, tugging on her sister's sleeve and pointing upward. All followed to where her finger was pointing to see Weiss hanging on a talon the size of her entire body that belonged to a gigantic Nevermore. "How could you leave me?" Weiss yelled at Ruby from her position. "I said jump," Ruby shouted back. "She's gonna fall," Blake pointed out. "She'll be fine," Ruby dismissed. "She's falling," Ren said. John, having finally recovered from his collision with the tree, looks up to see Weiss falling through the air. Jumping off the branch with his arms outstretched, he caught her in a slowdown moment. "Just dropping in," John says. Both look down and see that they still haven't touched the ground yet. Oh, God. They hang on to each other wide-eyed as their moment of suspension ends, their weapons flying behind them. "Oh, no," was John's exclamation before he face-planted into the dirt, limbs splayed out, serving as the perfect landing spot for Weiss as she falls into a seated position on his body. "My hero," Weiss said mockingly. "My back," John groaned. The Death Stalker is still hunting Purah, but she manages to land on her side at the feet of the heroes. "Great. The gang's all here. Now we can die together," Yang says. "Not if I can help it," Ruby says, followed by a battle cry and charging at the creature, followed by Yang, Blake, Weiss, Purah, John, Nora and Ren, leaving Naruto, Fu, Han and Rashi back at the temple. "So now what?" Naruto said. Suddenly, each of their ninja instincts kicked in as they jumped out of the way just in time for a black blur to crash into the spot the four once were and make a small cloud of dust, concealing whatever was attacking them. Naruto. Fu. Han. Rashi. Each of the Jinchuriki's respective Biju called out, all of them too surprised at what they were seeing. "What kind of," Naruto thought. "Grim is that?" Fu thought. That isn't a Grim," the QB told its container. "Well then what is it?" Rashi thought. "But there is," the Gobi said. "The Ryubi," the Yonbi finished. "It's a malevolent spirit created by the dark thoughts and feelings of downtrodden people," the QB said, though that last part about its creation being a lie. As all the Biju knew that this creature was a failed attempt by it to escape its prison. We have to take this thing down," Naruto commanded, the others nodding their heads. Naruto grabbed his Kubikurubjim off his back and got into the Uzumaki offense kata. Fu took out her pair of tonfas and switched them into their twin submachine gun mode and got into a wind cutter kata. Han took his battle axe shotgun weapon off his back and got into a rock smasher kata. And Rashi took out his twin revolver blades and got into a Serai Wakata. They surrounded the Ryubi and all at once jumped at the beast. "Show me the darkness in your heart." The Ryubi spoke before charging at the 4-inch Cricky. But Itachi and Kisame. Here we find the S-rank criminal duo at the docks of one of the ports near the Oki, no Okinit in the land of waves. Having snuck past the sleeping fishermen and into one of the fishing boats. "Are you sure we can't hack off a few limbs, Itachi?" Kisame asked his partner. "We're trying to be stealthy here, so no. We can't," Itachi said. "Oh well, I can just hack off other people's limbs later," Kisame said with a grin on his face. The two boarded a fishing boat and set course for their destination, Samahata picking up faint traces of 3-year-old chakra. Unknown to his partner, Itachi silently summoned one of his crows to be stationed at the docks for the Konoha retrieval team. Of Team 7, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, Chiyo, Gaara desist. Here we find what is left of Team 7, Kakashi, Sakura, and a recently reinstated Sasuke fighting alongside Lady Chiyo of Suna against Sasori and Madara. Well, the fight was over now. Sasori was dying from the blade that Sasuke used to pierce his only weakness, his heart. Madara got away, albeit missing an arm or two. Looks like I'm dying," Sasori said as he coughed up a glob of blood. "Before I die, I need to tell you something. Save that we're gonna take over the world and make peace crap, I've already heard it," Sasuke said. He was able to be reinstated as a genin due to the fact that he is part of a clan and due to the pestering civilian side of the council. Sakura, after a harsh scorning and a few smacks from Tsunade, focused solely on her Yanin car. Kakashi threw himself into his work, focusing on his missions. "No," Sasori said, "not that, it's something else." He coughed up another glob of blood, indicating his mortal wound, that the search for one of our targets has led us to send 2 of our team members across the Oki no Okinit. "So what? You sent 2 of your team members to their doom, I don't care," Sasuke said. The team consisted of Kisame Hoshigaki and Itachi Uchiha. That got Sasuke's attention, as he still wanted revenge on his brother. Their target is the Kyuubi's Cricky, Naruto Uzumaki. And with that, and a final cough up of blood, Sasori was no longer part of the world of the living. Team 7 was shocked, not by Sasori's death, but by the news of Naruto's whereabouts. Side story start. The Maelstrom Hunter remnants of the past. Part 2, the aftermath of the battle. With the power of the Shinju in her grasp, the battle became one-sided. Lightning struck from the skies, trees attacked soldiers, giant tidal waves swallowed their galleons whole. It was as if nature itself was fighting for Kaguya against the Egyptians. Just like that, the battle was over. The Egyptians were easily defeated single-handedly by Kaguya, and peace reigned once more. The further the ties between their two nations, Princess Kaguya and King Arthur were wed. It wasn't just for the political ties, as the two had fallen in love and eventually, they had 2 children. One by the name of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, who took on the last name of his mother, and the other by the name of Julius Ark, who took on the last name of his father. Unfortunately for the royal family, things would soon take a turn for the worst. For the great fruit hath fallen from the tree, will eventually rot. For humanity had yet to have the power of the gods in their grasps, they had yet to experience the power, the knowledge, the joy, the sorrow, the pain, the greed, the envy, the corruption that powers brings unto them. For humanity had yet to feel the power of the infinite Tsukumi. The power of the Shinju. The 4 shinobi, Kunoichi in the case of Fu, leapt all at once at the Ryubi. Acting on instincts, the beast charged at the nearest target, which happened to be Naruto. He swung the massive butcher's knife downward only for the beast to dodge the strike. Damn, this thing's fast. Naruto thought as the Ryubi dodged another one of his blade swipes. As soon as the beast dodged the second swipe, Rashi jumped in and slashed his gun knives at the beast, managing to leave a few small cuts on the beast, but not enough to do any real damage to the beast. Rashi was only able to get a few strikes in before he was thrown back into a tree by the Ryubi's tail colliding with his body. To Naruto's surprise, Rashi stuck to the tree much like his tree walking exercise. In all his time here in Remnant, he had not seen anyone use abilities such as this. The only place he could think of that had people with this ability was the elemental nations. But is he from the elemental nations as well? Naruto thought. Was Rashi from there? More importantly, if he was, what if Konoha finally found him? You can ask him later. But right now, focus on defeating the Ryubi. The Kyuubi said to Naruto. Shaking his head of his current thoughts, Naruto decided to focus on the Ryubi, which after flinging Rashi into the tree, was being confronted by Fu and Han. Han had his battle axe in its shotgun form and was firing shotgun shells at the Ryubi, whilst Fu had both of her tonfas in their submachine gun mode and was firing bullet after bullet at the Ryubi. Unfortunately, the man-made lead bullets did little to harm the beast, as most of the bullets barely made a dent in its skin. Seeing as the RWBY skin was impervious to their bullets, they stopped firing and jumped out of the way just in time as the beast charged once more. As the beast charged past Fu and Han brought down his battle-axe shotgun just in time to scratch the beast, leaving a long scar across its serpent-like body. Crying out in pain, the RWBY retreated into the forest, allowing the 4 shinobi to regroup to strategize. "You've got some explaining to do, Roshi," Naruto said. "I stuck to a tree, big whoop," Roshi said nonchalantly. "That was chakra you used there, and the only place I've seen people use chakra is. We can discuss this later. Right now, we have to stop the RWBY." Fu interrupted. Han nodded his head in agreement. "Fu's right, we can talk about this later," Han stated. "Fine." Naruto finally consented, getting more serious. "Alright, it's clear that the RWBY is impervious to regular bullets. It won't be easy to engage in close combat that leaves few options. Anybody know any Fuinjutsu?" Han asked, Naruto getting a cartoonish light bulb float over his head. "Yeah. I know lots of Fuinjutsu," Naruto exclaimed cheerfully, before getting serious. "If we can distract the RWBY for a few minutes, I can set up a Yaju Fuin no Jutsu, beast sealing technique, to immobilize it and then seal it with a Yashiro no Fuin, shrine seal." Finished with wording his plan, he looked up to see the 3 other shinobi looking at him like he had grown a second head. "What? Is it so surprising that I know Fuinjutsu?" "No, what's surprising is that you are able to come up with a decent plan," Fu said, causing Naruto to face a fault. "Still, it might work," Han commented, Roshi nodding his head in agreement. "Alright, let's do this," Naruto said, the 3 others present nodding in agreement. But Team RWBY, Ruby, Weiss, Blake, Yang, and Team JNPR, John, Nora, Purah, Ren. "Ruby, wait," Yang exclaimed as she ran after her sister. Ruby charged at the oncoming Death Stalker, still screaming, and fired crescent rows to increase her speed. When the two met, the Grim swiped Ruby away with one of its massive claws, knocking back said girl. "You don't worry. Totally fine," Ruby said as she got back up slowly. Turning back to the monster, she shot 12. 7x 99mm NATO rounds from her crescent rows at the Grim's skull. As soon as she got its attention, she ran away from it, sheathing her scythe as the Death Stalker went after her. "Ruby!" Yang exclaimed once more, running forward. But before she could reach Ruby, the Nevermore from before caws above them, flapping its wings and releasing lines of sharpened feathers with points, one of which had caught onto Ruby's cape, preventing Yang from reaching her. "Ruby! Get out of there." "I'm trying," Ruby yelled back, struggling with her cloak. The Death Stalker approached her and raised its golden stinger above the frightened red-haired girl and headed down on her. "Ruby!" Yang yelled out, reaching out in vain. Ruby closed her eyes, awaiting her inevitable demise, not noticing the white blur race past Yang. "You're so childish," Ruby heard the voice of Weiss exclaim. Opening her eyes, Ruby looked up to see that the stinger of the Death Stalker was encased in ice. "Weiss?" Ruby asked in disbelief. "And dim-witted and hyperactive, and don't even get me started on your fighting style. And I suppose I can be a bit difficult, but if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do this together. So if you quit trying to show off, I'll be nicer," Weiss continued. "I'm not trying to show off. I want you to know I can do this," Ruby retorted. "You're fine," Weiss said, walking away. Breathing a sigh of relief, Ruby clasped her hands together, closed her eyes, and gratefully whispered normal knees. As she got back up, she was rushed by the blonde blur that is her sister and pulled into a hug. "So happy you're okay," Yang exclaimed before the two looked up at the Nevermore that was beginning to circle back. "Eyes? That thing's circling back. What are we gonna do?" John exclaimed, noticing that the Nevermore was coming back at the group. "Look, there's no sense in dilly-dallying. Our objective is right in front of us," Weiss pointed out, the group taking notice of the relics. "She's right. Our mission is to grab an artifact and make it back to the cliffs. There's no point in fighting these things," Ruby added. "What about the other 4 we were with before?" Blake asked, worried for her friend Fu. "I'm pretty sure they can handle that thing they were chasing," Ren said. "For now, the best course of actions is to retreat." "Run and live, that's an idea I can get behind," John supported. With everyone in agreement, the 2 remaining duos that didn't grab a chess piece went to the temple ruins and grabbed one. All the while the Death Stalker continued to fight its bonds, cracking the ice a little in the process. "Time we left," Ren exclaimed as the pairs all had a relic now. "Right. Let's go," Ruby said, moving everyone forward with the exception of Blake and Yang. The latter with a smile on her face as she watched her sister. "What is it?" Blake asked her partner. "Nothing," Yang said, staring proudly at Ruby as she led their group onward, Blake smiling in realization. Of Team RHFN, Roshi, Han, Fu, Naruto. The four shinobi leapt from tree branch to tree branch in pursuit of the Ryubi, following the trail of vile chakra it left. The plan that Naruto concocted may not have been the best plan that the four could come up with, but it seemed like the best option at the moment. The four Jinchuriki followed the beast in utter silence, until Naruto broke the silence that permeated the air. "So what part of the elemental nations are you guys from?" Naruto asked hesitantly. Truth be told, he wasn't entirely certain they were even from the elemental nations, or if they knew of the hidden continent. The question lingered in the air as silence reigned once more. "The Wagakure?" Rashi answered after a few minutes with a soft tone that was barely a whisper, though the other three heard it perfectly clear. "The Wagakure as well," Han said shortly after Rashi's statement. "The Kigakure?" Fu replied after Han's response. Each of the responses surprised Naruto even more, seeing as nobody except the Biju knew about Remnant. "What about you?" Rashi asked Naruto, who was shaken out of his musings when questioned. "Hagakure," Naruto said, "so how'd you guys get here? In Remnant?" "We'll tell you later once we defeat the Ryubi," Fu said. Finding that answer acceptable for the time being, Naruto returned to focusing on the search for the Ryubi. A few minutes later, they heard the cry of a nevermore coming from back where the temple ruins were, causing the group to turn their heads slightly to where the sound came from. Continuing with their hunt, the group eventually came across a clearing. It wasn't small, but it wasn't very large either. A few patches of grass stood out in the clearing, along with a few bushes that stood below trees that had low-lying branches. And in the center of the clearing stood the Ryubi. The beast seemed to be remaining still to the untrained eye, but the four shinobi could see clearly that the beast was sensing the area around it. "Wait, how are we sure that the beast won't just escape again?" Rashi asked. "Good point. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," Naruto said, forming four shadow clones. "You guys know what to do." "Hi, boss," was the response of the four clones in unison before going off to do what they were assigned to do. "What are you doing?" Han asked, curious as to why Naruto created four clones. "Ensuring that the Ryubi can't escape," Naruto said cryptically. Soon enough, the clones were at the locations they were assigned, all four forming a square formation. In sync, all four of the clones did the hand signs Hibi and clasped their hands. Ninpu. Shishi Engine, Ninja Art. Four Flames Formation. The four clones cried out as a square barrier made from purple flames rose up, each clone containing enough chakra to maintain the barrier for 45 minutes. The four shinobi saw the purple flames rise up in the air at the same time the clones performed the jutsu. "What the hell is that?" Fu asked, seeing as the flames had appeared out of nowhere. "So that's what you had planned," Rashi said, and Inpu. Shishi Engine, clever. "How would you know that jutsu?" Fu asked, unsure of Naruto's skill in Fuinjutsu. "I'm an Uzumaki," Naruto said, puffing out his chest in pride. "Your argument is invalid." That wasn't the real reason as to how he knew that jutsu, but he had his pride. "But Uzumaki clan members are supposed to have red hair, not blonde hair," Fu argued. "Yeah? Well, I'm just that awesome," Naruto countered. "Anyways, let's do this." "Hi," was the chorus of replies that he got. As soon as they finished speaking, they all did their parts. Fu, Han, and Rashi engaged the Ryubi, keeping the manifestation of vile chakra busy, while Naruto prepared the necessary seals for the Yaju Fuin no Jutsu. Fu, Han, and Rashi all attacked from different sides, firing bullets and slashing their blades at the beast, distracting the beast as its targets were its current attacker, which changed each time one of the three Jinchuriki attacked. Soon enough, Naruto had finished inscribing the seals into the ground. "Alright. Draw the Ryubi over here," Naruto yelled out. And after a few minutes of dodging a pissed-off Ryubi, the trio was able to draw out the beast to the area Naruto specified. Kneeling on the floor, Naruto placed his hands on the ground. The chain-like seals rose up in the form of glowing chains that bound against the Ryubi's serpent-like body, immobilizing the beast using the special chakra that made the Uzumaki clan a powerful force to deal with. Clasping his hands together, Naruto began to prepare his next jutsu. Hatsu, Jin, Kai, Min, Shin, Gan, Repyo, Shozen, Mecha, Dan, Raku, Sho, Fu, Sai, Dan, Gik, Ragu, Bagi. Naruto went through the proper hand seals. "Yashiro no Fuin," Naruto yelled out, placing one of his hands on the ground as the seal array drew itself. Fu, Han, and Rashi jumped back out of the way as the seals on the ground lit up, engulfing the Ryubi's body. Now came the part that Harem Jiji had warned him about. Flashback start. Back in the Naruto cave warehouse, we find a 14-year-old Naruto with a reinforced Kage Bunshin of Uzumaki Harem, learning more about Fuinjutsu. Because of his Uzumaki heritage and his parentage, Naruto took to Fuinjutsu like a fish to water. Within the first 2 weeks after starting his Fuinjutsu training, Naruto had mastered calligraphy. It took less than 2 hours to create a reverse summonable storage scroll after learning the necessary seals. And now here he was, learning a specialized type of Fuinjutsu. Jiji, how'd you get this Fuinjutsu if it's exclusive to this land of demons? Naruto asked in curiosity. The Uzumaki clan has thrived for centuries. Our ancestors were there to help seal the demon that this jutsu was designed for, so it would be a likely cause that the clan would have an archive of how to perform said technique. So why exactly do I need to know this one then? Naruto bluntly asked. Well, you never know if you might need it someday or not. Harem said with a small chuckle at Naruto's bluntness. After that, Harem explained the mechanics of the seals used and what hand signs to use. Near the end of his explanation, the author used the plot coincidence no jutsu. After sealing the demon's physical body, it will become a battle of wills between the demon and the caster. Should the caster's will fail to overpower that of the demon's will, then the will of the caster shall be sealed, along with the demon's physical manifestation, leaving the demon's will to be in control of the caster's body. Well, that sucks. But I probably won't need to use this jutsu ever. Naruto exclaimed cheerfully. Despite his statement, Harem Jiji insisted that he learn it either way. Flashback end. Naruto's mindscape. Naruto suddenly found himself in his mindscape in the room where the Kyuubi's cage was held. Looming in front of him was a small leech. This made no sense at all. The RWBY was supposed to be this giant leech-like creature that fed off of darkness. Just as he thought about this, he noticed the leech had grown a bit from its original size. And kept growing and growing and growing. Until it finally was bloated and nearly half the size of the Kyuubi. Draw the leech near the seal gate. The Kyuubi said. Why should I? Naruto asked, very weary of trusting the Biju. Because I feel like eating, and I'm in the mood for some marinated leech. Figuring out what the Kyuubi was implying, Naruto decided to go along with its plan. Charging at the RWBY, Naruto summoned up 11 Kage Bunshins, making 6 pairs to form Rasengan. As the Rasengans were formed in 6 of the Naruto's hands, they each rapidly expanded past the point where they were larger than his body. And before the RWBY could react, bloated RWBY equals Akimichi being defeated by all-you-can-eat Buffet, stuffed and feeling lazy, it had been hit by the clones. The Dama Rasengan. Was the cry of the clones, each pushing the beast closer and closer the Kyuubi's cage. After the 6th Dama Rasengan, the RWBY hit its back against the cage bars. And that's when the beast of Vile Chakra froze. It froze at hearing the evil laughter that came from behind the bars of the cage. Before it could run away, a massive orange claw slammed it to the ground, effectively cutting off its chance of escape. Then the RWBY was dragged into the shadows that loomed behind the cage, followed by a few cries from the beast, then silence. Followed by the sound of a belch from the Kyuubi. Tasty. The Kyuubi said, the outline of its menacing eyes and mouth being the only things visible. That was easier than expected. Naruto said, a bit disappointed as he was expecting more of a challenge. Oh well, anyways, be seeing you around furball. And with that, Naruto disappeared from his mindscape, leaving a Kyuubi to frown in seriousness. Strange, how the RWBY showed up out of nowhere. And its chakra was fouler than I remembered it to be. The Kyuubi thought after consuming the RWBY. Laying back down in its cage, the Kyuubi decided to think on this on a later time. Of Team RHFN. Naruto jolted up from his previously slumped position. Looking around, he saw that the RWBY was gone, the seal was on the ground, and that his 3 teammates were standing around him. So how'd it go? Rashi asked, a small smirk on his face, causing Naruto to match it with one of his own. Oh, it was fine, a bit anticlimactic though. Naruto said as he got up off the ground. Looking around once more, his grin widened. Yada. We did it. Naruto exclaimed in a childlike manner, pumping his fist up in the air. After that little exclamation, the 4-inch Kriki made their way back to the cliffside, walking in a casual, nonchalant manner. The path they took led them past the temple ruins, along the way seeing the aftermath of a battle, which included the decapitated head of a Nevermore and a dead Death Stalker, with its stinger lodged in its head. And the 8 other initiates that were present before the group split up. Ruby was at the top of the cliff, her cape and petals flowing with the wind, looking down to her friends as they peered up. Well, that was a thing. Yang said. Ruby continued to smile as she heard the faint sound of an audience clapping. Turning to the source of the clapping sound, she saw Naruto, Fu, Han, and Rashi all clapping. When she noticed them, they each pulled out a sign with a number on it. In Rashi's hands was an 8. 0, in Han's was a 7. 5, in Fu's was a 7, and in Naruto's was a solid 9. Beacon Auditorium. Russell Thrush. Cardin, Winchester. Dove Bronzewing. Skylark. Ozpin listed off as the pictures of each person appeared on a screen. Currently all of the initiates that passed the initiation were here to be assigned their teams. The 4 of you retrieved the bishop pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team CRDL Cardinal, led by Cardin Winchester. The audience gave one more wave of ovation, while the 4 students walked off the stage as 4 other students walked onto the stage. Each taking their places in front of the headmaster as their faces filled the screen. Dawn Arc. Lai Ren. Pura Nikos. Nora Valkyrie. The four of you retrieved the rook pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team JNPR. Amidst the clapping, Nora laughed and gave Ren a hug, led by John Ark. Led by John said in disbelief. Congratulations, young man. Osmond said. A grinning Pura offered a friendly shoulder bump to John, but her fine leader was knocked over and fell to his butt in front of the now laughing audience. Lake Belladonna. Ruby rose. Why Shni? Yang Xiaolong. Osmond started, motioning over to the four as they stood before him. The four of you retrieved the knight pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team RWBY, Ruby. Led by Ruby Rose. This statement caused Weiss to look to her right surprised, where Ruby is obliviously in shock as Yang goes over to hug her sister. I'm so proud of you. Yang exclaimed as she hugged her sister. After the four stepped off stage, or dragged of in shock in Ruby's case, four more stepped up onto the stage. And finally. Han Irakama. Rashi Yamazeraku. Naruto Uzumaki. Futuruko. The four of you retrieved the king pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team RHFN, Archfiend. Led by Naruto Uzumaki. Said blonde knucklehead was sporting a large grin on his face as he did a little dance mentally. Amid the last round of cheers, Osmond looked around in interest. It looks like things are shaping up to be an interesting year. Osmond said. Team RHFN dormitory. After the party that was held for the new teams, everyone was assigned dormitories to sleep in. Team RHFN's dorm was near Team RWBY's and Team JNPR's as well, so they all knew each other well enough to be on a friendly basis. So here we find the squad of Jinchuriki preparing to sleep. Han was wearing a white t-shirt along with brown pajamas, Rashi was wearing dark red pajamas, along with a grey t-shirt that had a cartoon monkey on the front, Fu was wearing a black tank top and teal pajamas, and Naruto was wearing a white shirt with a nine-tailed fox on the back and blue, along with dark orange sweatpants. The four were prepped for sleep, but one question was still on Naruto's mind. You guys still haven't answered my question. Naruto blurted out, causing the three others to look at him. How exactly did you guys get to Remnant? Chapter end. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Peace out.